Have you had recent conversations with Alex Stamos on what's happening at Facebook? I mean, this is an old problem just coming back.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And no, I haven't had any real detailed conversations with Alex other than to reach out and give him support. I think you hit on a really important point. It's not a new issue. This is data privacy. It's been haunting us for a while. I think the most interesting thing about this case is that Facebook was acting as it was intended to act. It was acting as it was built. And it reminds me of a couple other breaches in the last decade. The Google Street View issue where information was being collected. Reminds me of the eBay issues where affiliate programs were used as intended to steal $40 million. Facebook is a steward of our data. It's a really important part of our technological infrastructure, and it's a hard thing to protect data.
You are calling it a breach, but Facebook doesn't. They're calling it not a breach. They're insisting that it isn't. How big of a problem is it that you have this mindset that this is not technically a breach, and how much of the mechanics of data markets do we understand to be able to shut this down?
Well, look, I mean, that's the thing. I don't think I was saying it was a breach. I was saying it was working as intended. This is, how this works. People get access to our data. We as consumers enter this contract where we say, give us a free service, we'll give you our data. And then in return, the service provider makes a commitment to do their very best. They can't really make promises because their job is to access the data, to use it to make their products better, to make money off of it, not really to protect it. I think you'll find most engineering groups, security does not come first. It's the usability part first.
Well, exactly, Joel. I mean, you said at one point they're the stewards of our data. Are they really the stewards of our data, or the users of our data, the consumers of our data, the resellers of our data? I mean, we've made this deal, whether we realized it or not. Is there an inherent problem in these companies that are driven by the value of our data that they're taking, because they'll always be using it in ways that we wouldn't like?
Yeah, well, I think there's an element to that. One thing I think is really important to understand is that Facebook has some of the best people in the world protecting our data, and yet it's really too big a task at the moment, obviously. So, I think this exchange, this bargain that we have with the providers needs to change a little bit. Like at Wickr, what we do is we promise we don't have access to your data. That's a really natural evolution of this whole data marketplace. It reminds me of Willie Sutton, the bank robber, who said, yeah, rob banks because that's where the money is. These days, it's the data that you're looking for.
Well, is that the evolution we're going to have? Because I think it's fair to say that Facebook has taken a real hit to its reputation, as well as its stock price, but more important, perhaps, its reputation. The government, both in the United States and in England, is all over at this point. Is that the next evolution? Are they going to have to change the way they do business so they don't make the data available, certainly the way they have been?
Yeah, I think that will. I mean, we've seen some of this already come about with GDPR, which is a regulation coming out of Europe to protect data. So, this has been coming, but, we've had data issues or breaches for a long time, and regulators have been relatively slow to act. I mean, in the encryption world, it's the opposite. We're being regulated, or we're looking at regulations to understand how much we can protect data. So this is all being discussed at high levels. It's a very, very interesting, complex issue.
So, Joel, let me go into the details of this specific case. So Facebook says that people who downloaded the Personality app gave consent for the app to collect information about their friends, and then their friends had privacy settings that were set to allow all of this to happen. So I'm a consumer. I use Facebook. Joel, tell me how to stop this from happening. Is it just some settings that I can mess with on the computer, or do we need further regulation to stop it at a higher level?
Well, I think you bring up a good point. I was on a panel in Seattle last week, and one of the people on the panel with me said, well, look, all of these products have settings that you can do, as a consumer, you can go through and modify and make sure that the product's working exactly how you want it to work as a consumer. The problem is the default settings are exactly how the company wants it to work so that they can harvest as much data as possible. And realistically, that's so they can make a better product and give us the service we like. But Sherry Ann, I think it's a really hard thing to put upon the consumer, the responsibility of clicking every box that they need to make sure their data is private.
Yes, people like me, I don't understand how to do it. I just stopped using Facebook altogether. So,
sure.
We're now hearing that a former platform operations manager at Facebook telling The Guardian that they always assumed there was something of a black market for Facebook data. Is there such a thing?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the definition of a formal black market for Facebook data is a pretty heavy term, I would say. I do think that data has been used aggressively. And look, people will continue to use data as aggressively as possible to, whether it's win elections or sell Levi's. They're going to be insatiable in their desire to get as much information as they possibly can. But regulators need to understand that. Legislators need to understand that. Consumers do as well.
That's what I was going to raise, is regulators and legislators, because you said as much as they can, as is possible, the government can limit that. And if we look back to the history of tech, whether it's IBM or it's Microsoft, when the government's got involved, they haven't necessarily stopped the company, but they've slowed it down, and that's given an opportunity to competitors. Is that what we may see here? Other competitors to Facebook getting more of an advantage because Facebook will have to pull in a bit because of regulators?
Well, I don't know if that would be the case. I think if there's regulation, it might expose other companies as well. So I think that regulation is stemming, it'll put a cap on innovation. It just does, it always has. I think the regulators and the legislators typically don't really stay up to date on technology, and so some of the regulations are yesterday's regulations by the time they become real. But yeah, I think regulation always opens a door for a competitor. But I think what I hope to see is the competition is more about how companies coming in to protect data rather than exploit it.